Colin, this is just a test. Are you able to hear me?
I am able to hear you and see you. You're good to go. Wait, give it a few minutes for folks to join if they're interested. Otherwise, it may just be Ricky and us. All right, good morning, everyone. We will go ahead and get started with our overview of the CoC NOFO competition. Thank you for joining us. We can do brief introductions and then we'll go into a PowerPoint presentation, and hopefully it won't take an hour and a half, but allocated plenty of time in case there are questions. Let me introduce myself. I'm Colin Davis. I'm the manager of the homeless system for the city of Durham and the Community Development Department. We have Melissa Hernandez from our team, who was our coordinator, helping to run some of our back-end technical stuff. And our newest member to the team is Anthony Henderson. Anthony joined us last week and will be working with Lloyd on this year's annual NOFO competition. I do see a few folks here. I see Ricky, if you want to introduce yourself, you're welcome to. Just your name and organization.
Sure. Good morning, folks. I am off camera because I'm eating breakfast and that's rude. But my name is Ricky Gardner and I'm with Housing for New Hope.
Fantastic. And I see Myron Smith, if you want to introduce yourself and organization.
Myron Smith, I'm with Safety Net.
Okay. Sally Wilson.
Sally Wilson, Project Access of Durham County, which oversees Durham homeless care transitions.
Fantastic. Tracy Stone-Dino.
Good morning, Tracy Stone-Dino with Alliance Health. Good morning.
Thank you. And Andrea Carey.
Hi, good morning. Andrea Carey with the NCCEH Data Center, HMI3.
Fantastic. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I will get us started on our How to Apply workshop. You all see this presentation?
Yes.
All right, perfect. If you have questions as we go along, please I'm not gonna be able to see hands. So you can either type questions in the chat, and Anthony, if you see a hand go up, would you just sort of flag it and let me know, and we'll try and address questions as we go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we've done welcome, and what we'll do is go over our HUD's homeless housing priorities, the CoC grant competition, Durham's application process, which is a subcategory of the overall competition, and then we can do a Zoom grants piece if there's some time. I think all of you have used Zoom grants to apply for funds in the past. So HUD's homeless housing priorities. The priorities are ending homelessness for all persons, using a housing first approach, reducing unsheltered homelessness, and improving our system performance. So all applications need to be focused on these 4 items. The second set of housing priorities is partnering with housing, health, and service agencies. These are things that are going to require written agreements between housing, health, and service providers with values of written commitments and using funds other than continuum of care funds. So that means bringing in additional resources from the health system, not just with dollar figures and written commitments, MOUs, MOAs, however you want to look at those. There's also a piece of looking at racial equity and how do we advance that in our system. And as you know, that is something that's big in Durham, and we are constantly looking at how do we ensure equity of resources and ensuring that there is not a disproportionate amount of resources going to one group or another. It's really trying to make sure that we have resources going where they're needed in an equitable manner. We also want to be improving assistance to people who identify in the LGBTQ plus community. And there's a big piece in this NOFO about involving persons with lived experience. And that is something that we we take seriously, and we do have 2 seats on our Homeless Services Advisory Committee for persons with lived experience. And we'll need to be looking over the next to include more people with lived experience in decision-making and soliciting input. Sorry. So we need to, this is Housing First. We need to direct, this is, how does Housing First work? It's really getting people into housing as quickly as possible and then getting services wrapped around them. We do understand that landlords and other people who provide housing do need income from tenants to be able to qualify them for rent in a rapid rehousing project, and sometimes even in a permanent housing, permanent supportive housing project as well. But the goal really on Housing First is we are not trying to put extra conditions on people when they're moving into housing and exiting homelessness, and ensuring that we do provide supportive services and people are free to reject some of the supportive services other than those that are required by HUD, such as once a month meetings when financial assistance is being provided. You cannot force people to go to a parenting course, for instance, or engage in other supportive services if the household is not interested in doing so. We're also looking at outreach and trying to get people engaged in the homeless system, and including those who are unsheltered. The shelter system would be a low demand but high expectations. So we're not asking people to leave due to intoxication. However, if intoxication is an issue that is creating a behavioral issue or a safety issue, then those safety issues are the reasons for exits from programs, not the use of substances, and continue to use case management. So the homeless system, when we're looking at measuring things, HUD measures a variety of system performance. And these first 5 items are worth about 60 points, if I remember correctly, in this NOFO, which is a little bit more than what was what they were scored in last year. I think there were 59 points total. So these are looking at how long are persons remaining homeless in our system. And that is from the time they're identified as experiencing homelessness to the time that they exit homelessness. And this is a system performance measure that we are not going to be able to change that number between now and when this application is due. So this is really what happened last year. And we need to be looking at that really for how does this year's application and what the work we're doing now will impact next year. Also looking at numbers of people who return to homelessness within a 2-year time period. We do historically have a pretty good number of folks who have a small percentage of people returning to homelessness. So that is good in our favor. Also looking at numbers of persons who experience homelessness in Durham. And as you know from our Point in Titan count, our numbers have been going up, not going down. That is a nationwide issue, not just a Durham issue. However, we do want to see the number of persons experiencing homelessness to find a way to make that number less going forward. Job and income growth of people in CoC funded programs. This is one of those things where HUD really wants to see people getting into the job market or having income or increasing income if that is a disability or other sources of income, not just employment. So you would use employment income, disability income, and seeing those numbers go up. Number of persons who become homeless for the first time. This is looking at system data over the course of a year. So we're not going to be able to change those numbers between now and this application being due. Homeless prevention and housing placement of people unstably housed. This is the category 3 of HUD's homeless definition. and successful housing placement, which means how many people are exiting homelessness to permanent housing, not just to temporary or exiting to institutions. This would be permanent housing. Now we'll take a look at the HUD CoC homeless grants competition. So every year HUD sends out the notice of funding opportunity for the Continuum of Care homeless grants competition. This year, we anticipate we should be able to apply for over $2.2 million in this year's CoC NOFO competition. We'll talk more about how that 2.2 million is broken out shortly. It's important to remember that this is a competition. This is not a, if you apply, you will be funded. HUD does continue to require us to rank all project applications. And this goes back to when the government instituted sequestration and there was a big funding cut across all departments, and HUD has kept that in place ever since then, where local jurisdictions have to put 93% of the total amount into what is called Tier 1. Tier 1 is basically guaranteed funding if it makes it out of the local competition. Tier 2 is where the remaining 7% of the funding from our annual renewal funding goes. And that is if there are budget cuts, anything in Tier 2 would be more likely to be cut versus those in Tier 1 on a local level. HUD will award Tier 1 before they go to Tier 2 in the event of budget cuts. So, eligible uses of CoC funds. Continuum of Care funds can be used for permanent housing, which is permanent supportive housing for those who meet the HUD definition of chronic homelessness, or can be used for rapid rehousing. There is also an opportunity to apply for funds under a supportive services only funds for coordinated entry and the homeless management information system. Right now, all of our funds are prioritized, and HUD's priority has always been permanent housing over the others. So where can these costs, where can funds from this competition be actually spent? You could acquire, rehab, or build new units for permanent supportive housing. Organizations can do leasing or rental assistance. And leasing is when the organization awarded funds leases the property from a landowner and then sublets those units to persons who meet the eligible criteria of the program. Or rental assistance, which is the tenant-based rental assistance, where the tenant has the lease in their name directly with a landlord. The agency itself does not serve as the landlord. The agency with the HUD funds is paying to a third party on behalf of the person who has the lease in their name. Violence against women costs is a new category this year. So organizations can put money in the emergency transfer plan to assist households who are experiencing intimate partner violence and need emergency transfers. This will allow funds to make that happen. Supportive services, those include things such as case management and transportation to and from appointments, just other costs associated with supporting clients. Operating costs are really tied to the type of project you have, but those are typically rent, utilities, repairs and maintenance, things like that, depending on what's in the leasing. I see Ricky, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Hey, Colin, thank you. So going back a couple of bullets to the leasing or rental assistance,
Mhm.
you mentioned CoC funds can be used for leasing where an agency would have an agreement with the property owner or landlord, and then the client would come in. And so I think that term is master leasing.
Yes, you can
So-
master lease.
And if this next question is too much of a deep dive, we can talk about it after the session. But so for a project like rapid rehousing, where like if the client has income, they should be paying, a portion of their rent
Mhm.
in accordance with progressive engagement with that client. Where does the client's money go? Like if the agency is leasing the unit and paying the rent, what do you do with the money the client wants to pay for the rent?
Great question. So let me talk about two pieces. One, on the master leasing, as if you're not familiar, HUD CoC NOFO money requires a 25% match for all expenses. So if you apply for $100 of CoC funds, you have to bring $25 of cash or in-kind contributions to the table. One area that match has not, that where the match is exempt is in leasing. If an organization does master leasing under, let's say, a permanent supportive housing, those leasing dollars are exempt from that 25% match. Now, to your question, Ricky, on the leasing versus on the leasing piece, when the organization takes on the master lease, the organization would pay the leasing for that unit. Then there is a lease that the organization must also have with the tenant who is living in the unit. And then it is up to the agency administering that program to collect the rent from the tenant. The rent collected from the tenant is counted as program income and then must be spent on eligible activities for that particular project. So if I am the organization and I am paying the landlord ABC company $1,000 a month for a unit, and then I have a lease with Charlie Brown, and the lease with Charlie Brown states that based on Charlie Brown's income, his rent calculation is he owes me as the agency $200 a month, then I am responsible as the agency for collecting the $200 per month from that tenant. That $200 per month, I would be responsible for booking as program income and then showing that I'm spending that $200 per month on an eligible activity such as case management or transportation or whatever else is eligible based on the application process. Does that answer your
Gotcha.
question?
Yes, super helpful. Thank you, Colin.
You got it. And I have not seen leasing done on a rapid rehousing project. I'm not saying it can't be done. Leasing is typically used more often in a permanent supportive housing project. Other questions on this? Obviously, homeless management information system can also be spent, and project admin allows up to 10% for new projects. If your renewal project will show up in eSnaps with kind of the current budget line items. So what does the Durham Continuum of Care need and or want? So the Homeless Services Advisory Committee, that's the HSAC, established that the priority for CoC bonus projects is permanent supportive housing for persons who meet the definition of an eligible dedicated plus project participant. So this year, we really are looking for more permanent supportive housing as we are seeing the homeless population grow and need more intensive services and more people becoming chronically homeless. Applications from organizations not currently receiving continuum of care funds will receive 20 bonus points in the evaluation of the new project application. So if there's an organization out there that has never applied and is not receiving continuum of care funds, the local competition will provide an additional 20 points on that, as HUD does want us to try and bring new providers on board. Move on strategies in permanent supportive housing projects is also important. This is helping people who are chronically homeless be able to move on from those where they no longer need the supportive services, and maybe they no longer need the financial subsidy as well. We're also looking at shared housing options and tenant-based rental assistance projects. That's what TBRA stands for. So looking at shared housing options for rapid rehousing, for instance. Permanent supportive housing and dedicated plus. Dedicated plus projects, these are for permanent supportive housing. These may serve chronically homeless households, currently homeless people who are not able to maintain permanent housing, but had been chronically homeless prior to permanent housing entry. So a dedicated plus, that would be somebody who, line item B there would be somebody who is perhaps in a rapid rehousing project and cannot maintain their rapid rehousing unit without permanent supportive housing, but they've been chronically homeless prior to entering that rapid rehousing, for instance. Or somebody who had been in a permanent supportive housing project and lost that housing and needed to go back into a PSH program, as long as they've been chronically homeless prior to entering the first time, that chronicity would allow them to go into a dedicated plus category. Permanent housing, people who have been homeless for at least 12 months in the last 3 years, but not on 4 separate occasions. So to be chronically homeless, generally you have to be homeless for at least 12 months and had 4 separate occasions. A dedicated plus project would allow you to serve somebody who had 12 months of homelessness in the last 3 years, and perhaps that 12 months was on 2 occasions, not on 4 occasions. And the individual head of household must have a disability. So disability is key, and 12 months of homelessness is key for dedicated plus and permanent supportive housing. Veterans fitting one of the above criteria at intake into a VA homeless assistance program could also qualify for a dedicated plus project if a VA project was not successful. And all dedicated plus projects must meet fair housing requirements and serve households with children. Renewal and expansion. Projects currently funded through CoC are eligible for renewal. Organizations can apply to expand an existing renewal project to increase the number of units and or serve additional persons in the project. If a project is performing well or satisfactorily, organizations should consider applying for expansion. So if you've got a project that you are currently running and you wanted to do a bonus project, you could, rather than starting a new bonus project, you could apply for bonus funds in a permanent supportive housing project, for instance, to expand that project to increase the number of units or serve additional people, because you'd have additional money going into that project. It makes sense to do an expansion if you've got a project that's running well, because in renewal years, if that is being funded, you would only have to do 1 renewal application, not 2. So the more projects you have in future years that are awarded, you start adding more and more applications that have to be redone annually. Consolidating projects or transition project applications. So you can apply to consolidate 2 projects. So if you had 2 permanent supportive housing projects that end in the same calendar year and you're able to do so, you are able to merge those projects into 1 application during this application, or a transition project where you would be able to apply to switch from rapid rehousing to PSH or permanent supportive housing to rapid rehousing. So there is a process for that as well. If you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us at the lead agency so that we can assist with making sure we go through all the right boxes. Domestic violence bonus. HUD has provided for domestic violence bonus competitions in 4 competitions since 2018, and that has resulted in over $200 million distributed across the country. Durham was awarded a DV bonus project in 2018, 2021, and 2022, which added over $600,000 to our annual renewal demand. The project must be for a new project that is dedicated to survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking who qualify under the definition of homelessness. Human trafficking may be included. The project could be a rapid rehousing project or a supportive services only project to improve coordinated entry for DV survivors. So this is a separate set aside of money that is for domestic violence only, and it is not guaranteed. It is not part of our annual renewal demand. This is if we score high enough and the project itself scores high enough, it may be awarded. We do want people to apply for these funds because you never know if you're going to win or not. But if you do win, as we've seen, an extra $600,000 of resources have come to the community because of these applications. So in 2023, the new project funding, we're anticipating a little somewhere in the neighborhood of $140,000 of a CoC bonus. If you remember, that is prioritized for projects that will serve chronically homeless through a permanent supportive housing program classified as dedicated plus. So $140,000 prioritized for chronically homeless projects. A DV bonus project of at least $206,227 is anticipated, and that must be for persons identified as fleeing domestic violence and can be either rapid rehousing or supportive services as part of a coordinated entry system. Program requirements. So leasing versus rental assistance, we talked about that a little bit before. Leasing is the organization who receives funding has the lease with the landlord and then has a lease with the tenant. Tenant-based rental assistance is the tenant has the lease with the landlord and the organization is paying a portion of the rent on the tenant's behalf. Leasing and rental unit housing must meet housing quality standards, and there are checklists that must be filled out and be part of the project file to ensure that the housing that tenants are moving into meet housing quality standards. There must be a supportive services agreement in place, occupancy agreements and leases. There must be funds must be drawn down in a timely manner. HUD requires funds must be drawn from their system at least once per quarter. So every 3 months, there needs to be a draw from locks. Must have a termination policy. You are not allowed to involuntarily separate families. Families are as the family defines themselves. It is not up to us as a continuum or individual organizations to define what a family is. So a family is whatever they show up and say, this is my family. It's our responsibility to serve them as that family. I must be part of the central and coordinated entry and coordinated assessment process, which helps us to ensure equity and smooth transitions through our system. And you must participate in the homeless management information system. Questions on any of these? Minimum requirements: must be a nonprofit organization, state, local government, instrumentality of the state or local government or a public housing authority, must have financial capacity to manage a reimbursement-based contract, and must provide 25% of HUD-funded awards except for leasing. That match can be cash or in kind, and you must be eligible to contract with the federal government to spend federal funds. So that means no disbarments and no major issues in the SAM system. And you must also be in good standing with the city of Durham. Go ahead, Tracy.
Sorry, I'm over here multitasking. Excuse me, when you were talking more about the, the CoC does not define what is considered a housing composition.
Mhm.
Is it, when they're registered through the coordinated entry or intake process, is that information kind of shared then if there's a group or a family, whether it's, a woman with kids or a male with kids or two individuals who are not necessarily married but are homeless together, is that captured on the front end through the coordinated intake process, or the individual provider housing provider organizations kind of defining that or trying to gather that information?
It is captured at the entry to the system in coordinated entry, what the household composition is on entry to the homeless system. So it could be a two-parent household with children. It could be a single parent with children. It could be a multi-generational household where you've got a grandparent, a parent, and the parent has kids. It could be a same-sex couple with children. It could be households with teenagers. Way back in the day, there used to be programs that if teenagers were part of a household, teenagers over the age of 12, or fathers who were part of a family, like dads and teenagers, wouldn't be eligible to go to certain programs. That has largely gone away, thank goodness, and we're not separating families anymore. But we do want to make sure that people understand that families look different for every family. There is no set, this is a family. It could be a grandparent who has custody of their grandchildren, and that's the family. So does that answer your question, Tracy?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You got it.
Colin, is it worth addressing whether or not the age of the children is important? For example, 18 and under, or what happens to a 19 or 20-year-old as part of a family, and can that be used?
That can be part of the family. It just depends on how they come in. Sometimes that adult child would, their income, if they're working, may get counted towards the household income if they're over 18. But that's really a case-by-case basis. So the application process here in Durham, HUD released the NOFO on July 5th, 2023. All new and renewing project applications must submit an application for funding in our Zoom grants link, and all applicants must answer some questions in Zoom grants and attach several documents to the application. This is part of our check to ensure that organizations are able to meet HUD's requirements. And it also provides the scoring committee and ranking committee the information they need to determine where organizations fall in terms of the ranking process, and which organizations will get classified as tier 1, tier 2, what bonus projects will be recommended for moving forward. So everybody will need to go through the same process. Documents that must be submitted by all applicants: a draft of the project application from eSnaps. HUD has not opened up eSnaps yet for renewals as of Friday. I have not checked eSnaps yet today to see if those renewals are available yet or not. Grant expectations agreement, a certification letter, the organization's 2 most recent audits, a letter to the HUD secretary confirming match requirements. This letter is basically stating how and what sources of money you will be using to meet your match. So if you are using in-kind contributions and let's say a third-party provider is going to be providing your match, you would need to include an MOU stating that Agency A is providing mental health therapy to X number of participants valued at X number of dollars for the time period of your grant. And this will qualify as our match, as there will be no charge. The other option would be that'd be an in-kind. If you're using cash, you would write a letter basically stating that organization will be providing a 25% match in X specific dollar amount that equals 25% of the funds being awarded for the grant period for that particular project, and will not be using HUD funds to meet that match. You would have to have an active Durham Continuum of Care membership agreement and an annual progress report for the project for the period that runs 7/1/22 to 6/30/2023. So that's a renewal. You would run your annual progress report for that from the HMIS.
Colin, there's a note in the chat from Andrea Carey. It says the last bullet point referred to a CoC APR report from HMIS or Sage Summary or the Sage Summary.
Sorry, I think you just answered that preemptively, actually, Colin. You were saying that was for the HMIS report that CoC APR and HMIS.
Yeah, it would come from the APR would need to come from the HMIS, not from Sage, because all of the HUD CoC contracts don't run on the 7/1 to 6/30 contract cycle. So the Sage report wouldn't necessarily line up with those dates, and you can't run a Sage report for things outside of your reporting periods. And that's another thing that's important to know is if you're a new project, you'll choose kind of what month you want your project to start in. Recommend starting it later in the calendar year, sometime July 1 or later, as HUD doesn't typically make their award announcements until the January to March timeframe. And then there is a time period that it takes to get the contracts in place to start spending the money. So once you are awarded funds, the contract comes, you need to get set up in a lock system to make draws as well. Applicants for new project funding, including an expansion project, must submit the following additional documents. So if you've never applied for Continuum of Care funds or planning to apply, you'll need to submit to us the conflict of interest policies and procedures that are signed and dated, a list of your board of directors by name, who's on it, term limits, dates of term, and HMIS at NCCEH agency participation agreement, showing that you are and either have an HMIS agreement or are in the process of getting HMIS licenses and projects set up. Certification of eligibility to contract with the federal government. So this means you need to be registered in sam.gov. There is a process to do that. And you also need to make sure that you update that SAM registration annually. There is no charge to do that. So you just need to go in there, follow the directions, and that's where the federal government tracks your eligibility to contract with the federal government. You will need to set up an organizational applicant profile in eSnaps. That is a process that takes a little bit of time as well and relies on having a SAM.gov generated unique identifier number. The project's policies and procedures. So if you're applying for a rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing project, you would need to submit your policies and procedures for that particular project. The organization's current fiscal year budget, certificate of insurance, organizational chart, and 3 examples of organizational hiring announcements, and the organization's anti-discrimination policy. Questions for new applicants? The reason we're doing this is we didn't have time this year to do a pre-application that we normally do. Generally speaking, we do our pre-application process earlier in the year. This year, we're sort of doing our pre-application and application at the same time. So we have to make sure that any new applicants have the infrastructure in place to be able to meet HUD's requirements. So we'll be working through this as we go through this competition. So the next piece of the process, nonprofits not currently receiving HUD CoC funds must also submit a 501c3 letter and a active charitable solicitation license from North Carolina, showing that you're able to apply for and solicit funds. All applicants may submit a self-evaluation using the 2023 CoC scorecard that's new or renewal, formal written agreements documenting the contribution of housing subsidies, and formal written agreements documenting the value of healthcare assistance. Those are things that are going to be required for us to score well on. Has the 2023 scorecard been released yet? I can't remember, Ricky. Let me see if it comes up later in the slides. It should be
Okay.
fine.
Because I know we had one for the RFP back in May/June, and we had one for ESG, but I'm like, I don't remember a CoC scorecard.
I think we talk about it later in this slideshow. Just give me a second. So HUD released, here's the timeline and the schedule. HUD released the CoC NOFO. The Zoom grants open to project applicants on the 22nd. Today's application workshop. The deadline for written questions is, I think that's Friday this week, the 28th. Written questions, please submit any written questions to Durham opening doors at durhamnc.gov. We will post all answers to written questions on August 4th. August 18th, project applications are due in Zoom grants. Anything that is not received by the cutoff on August 18th in Zoom grants will not be considered as part of this application. August 31st, the evaluations subcommittee completes the project scoring and proposed rankings. September 7th, HSAC will approve the rankings and funding recommendations. September 8th, projects will be informed of the rankings and funding recommendations by Community Development Department. And September 28th, submission of all project applications, the CoC collaborative application, and priority listing will be submitted to HUD. Yes, Ricky.
What is the time for the submission on August 18th? Is it 11:59 p.m.?
I believe it is
5 p.m.?
11:50. I believe it is 11:59 p.m. because Zoom grants automatically turns it off.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the scorecard would be in the Zoom grants library. If it's not completed and not there, it will be posted in that library. So key points. This is a competitive grants process. Projects that submit a full application may not be recommended by the Durham CoC to HUD for funding, and projects recommended to HUD by the Durham Continuum of Care for funding might not be awarded HUD funding. And this doesn't mean that the project's not good. It just means that a project might not have scored high enough on the local competition. And when we submit things to HUD, HUD may determine for budget reasons or other reasons that they're not going to fund other projects. So bonus projects or tier 2 projects might not be funded by HUD. There could be a disbarment issue in a tier 1 project that would prevent HUD from funding that project. So just keep it in mind, just because you applied does not guarantee you funding. HUD does have a process for organizations that believe they were not treated fairly or equitably in a local competition to submit a solo application directly to HUD. Directions for that are in the NOFO. And it is strongly recommended that all organizations read the NOFO and in its entirety to understand all the nuances of it, as that does sort of carry the rules for the project you submit for this funding cycle. New project scoring tool overview. Ranking of all projects in HUD's tiers is guided by the 2019 monitoring and evaluation ranking policy for the CoC funding requests. So 5 sections of the scorecard with 190 points total. Organizational capacity is 13 points. Project description and performance is 117 points. Budget, leverage, and match is 20 points. Equity is 15 points. CoC and HUD priorities is 25 points. Applications from the new organizations receive a 20-point bonus, and 3 points are available for submission of a completed scorecard as self-evaluation. So if you evaluate each of your projects or a project, you would be eligible for a 3-point local bonus. Questions on that? The scoring tool overview, we're using the same tool as used in the first semi-annual evaluation of 2023 with 3 exceptions. Question 6B, question 10B, and question 17B will be adjusted for more equitable rapid rehousing project scoring. So there's your answer to that question, Ricky, is we're using the semi-annual evaluation tool with those exceptions. The tool evaluates project performance on 4 components: achieving positive outcomes for participants, 125 to 150 points, serving high needs populations, 30 points, project efficiency, 40 points, HMIS participation, 20 points. 240 points are possible for rapid rehousing projects. 215 points are possible for permanent supportive housing projects. And 3 points are available for submission of a completed scorecard as a self-evaluation. So that would help as well. Questions and answers, you can always go to the hudexchange.info/CoC. You can send questions about the application to Durham Opening Doors at durhamnc.gov by July 28th. And answers will be posted on the Durham CoC website by August 4th, 2023. The collaborative application preparation, you're invited to participate in 5 bi-weekly Durham CoC virtual meetings to provide input to the CDD on the Durham collaborative application. Meetings are scheduled for 10 to 11:30 p.m. on July 28th, August 11th, August 25th, September 8th, and September 22nd. If you want to register for one or more of these sessions, please do so.
Alan, that's actually AM, not PM.
Oh, AM, sorry. Sorry. First day back from vacation. My brain's still catching up. Please, if you're able, please join these. Getting input from everyone will help us write a stronger application. The stronger our application is, the higher likelihood we have of winning bonus projects. So all input is helpful. If you can't make those meetings and you're looking at the NOFO and have ideas, please reach out to us through Durham Opening Doors at durhamnc.gov to let us know so that we can try and get that information from you to strengthen the application in areas that we at the city may not have the same level of knowledge that you all have as the direct service providers. Orientation to Zoom grants is optional, and there is a link for this. We'll send this out to folks. If you're interested in this email, please drop your email in the chat. We can email this presentation to all of you, and it will also be in our Zoom grants library. Other questions?
So we're not going to go into Zoom grants at all today.
No, there's application piece on that.
Okay.
Do you need a orientation on Zoom grants?
I mean, I need at least like the address of how to get into it.
You got it. I think
Being honest.
it should be in the, if not, we'll send it out. There should be a link to it in the application that we had. So we'll get that sent out.
Oh yeah, Colin, I wasn't sure. Do you want us to put our emails in the chat if we'd like a copy of the slides?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Other questions?
Well, Colin, I do have a question. So you mentioned that there's a CoC bonus for DV that's valued at about 206,000 and some change. Is that in addition to the CoC DV project we already have? Or are we losing
Yes,
something?
that would be, no,
Okay.
that would be a new bonus project.
Okay, thank you.
And you do not need to be a victim service provider to apply for that DV bonus. So anybody who works with persons who have a history of domestic violence could apply for those funding.
And the deadline for question is this Friday at what time?
It is the 28th, 5 p.m.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Got a quick question
Yes.
regarding Zoom grants. You know, the city of Durham has used this as a ways to kind of preliminary process in the past. Has anything changed in Zoom grants that we should be aware of? I know over the last couple of years due to the pandemic, you know, we were kind of moving through that as it was, but has anything changed or updated regarding the system that we need to be aware of? Okay.
Yeah, it's the same system, same thing. So if you've been through the Zoom grants process before, it'll be exactly the same as previous years.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? If not, we will adjourn. Thank you for your time. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.